from me to Anthony. And the first week of June is the Cedar Hills Days. My grandchildren think that it's my carnival, that I do it for them. We also celebrate this way. This is Grandpa's train.
That's so cool.
We did.
Watch him go off this jump.
Perhaps the most exciting news. And all our kids are there tonight at 8 o'clock.
Oh, you're not telling us? Let's open it now.
Wait, how
Now.
We need to find out.
Can you say
I'll
So
send
we
word
can
to your
open it and
trainers.
hand it back to you already open.
Walk right through it and then
That's
we won't tell you.
Hand it to me already
Oh,
open.
it's so exciting.
Okay, you have, I don't know if you caught this, but each of your 10 training sessions have begun with the phrase, "this teacher." So will you please tell me why that phrase? What does that mean?
It's not from President Packer's talk, is it?
I was just about to say, I think it's from President Packer's talk.
It's a play off that word, that phrase. But who's this teacher? Who are we talking
The perfect teacher.
about? Or,
Jesus.
none of us are perfect, so
Jesus teaching.
the ideal teacher. It's what we're all trying to be, okay? This is the teacher that will be recommended for hire. This is the teacher who will have powerful scriptural experiences with students every day, like Brother Hunt talked about. This is the teacher who will pay a price in preparation. This is the teacher who will not waste a minute of their summer. And so my assignment is this teacher continually seeks to improve, notice, 4 things. Now, as you look at that, one of those 4 is very, very obvious when it comes to those who will be mentoring you. Which of those 4? I expect feedback where?
Performance.
Yeah, it's listed first, and please don't misunderstand. That's not the only one you'll get feedback in. If there's something in those other categories that could keep you from being successful with students, you can be assured that we will probably mention it to you. Now, I love this word. I want you to look at it really carefully. The purpose of a feedback session is to do what? Who? Okay, you're saying you. Who else can be fed by our feedback to you? Who? Students can be blessed.
I think the trainers, because then they have the confidence to give further feedback from
We're all fed. It's like taking your 2 little loaves, and at the end of class, just pulling them apart and talking about it. The most oft asked question you will hear from your trainers, what went well? And why? Now, why is that a really good question?
That's just introspection on their own part.
Great. What else?
I think it's important for the trainers to know our perception of how we teach and how it goes. Because then if we're perceiving something incorrectly, then they know kind of where to help us and where we're going our own teaching.
Why would we ask the why question? This went really, really well. Why would we ask the why? Please, please.
Because it's not going to be the same every time. So if we say, this went well this time, and then we try to do that every
If you can
lesson, it's not.
identify the reason it went well, why did it go well? Because we were buried in the Word. Because you were asking exceptional questions. Because it was so relevant. Then what can you do, Sydney?
You can apply that to other things.
Repeat it. So another oft-asked question you will hear, what didn't go quite as well as you'd hoped, and why? Why would that be a good question?
I can say why questions produce principles. That's a principle, right? But I'm just so grateful for that because, you know, the first one helps us build on strengths and the second one helps us improve weaknesses. And it's just
Awesome.
Matt?
I was in our mini teacher 25-minute lessons. I shared with my group a story about a kid that I worked at an elementary school for a little bit, and this kid was making tried to impress everybody else and make them laugh, and then I told him he probably should stop that, and he said, and he just kept doing it. When we went down to lunch, he comes up to me, because he couldn't pronounce my last name, he says, "Mr. D, my head hurts." And I said, and you have any idea why? And he said, "No, not really." And I'm like, "You got a little red mark on your forehead. Where did that come from?" So he goes, "Because I was banging my head against the wall, wasn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's probably where the source of your headache is coming from." So it's so important that we understand the relationship between the principles that we put in practice and the consequences or the blessings that we get from that. And if we understand that the spirituality being produced in the classroom is because we're buried in the Word, we're not going to think it had anything to do with our personal performance. We don't want to confuse the action with the consequence.
And if I can replicate the why, it went well, what could I do with the things that didn't go so well? Fix them. Just fix it. That didn't go so well. Why? Because only about 4 kids were engaged. So let's talk about how we could, and that's the basis of our feedback, really.
I like, you've been talking a bit about the word feedback itself as to help us understand its purpose. And the word can also mean, like when you hear a microphone scream at you, when it does that really high pitched thing, that's feedback. And what's happened is that the output has been picked up by the input, and it's created this cycle that just goes crazy. And some of you that know more about audiovisual type stuff would give a lot better explanation than that. But what feedback means is when the output is being sent right back. And really, that's largely what we do in the back of the classroom. And what I've said to many of you before is if you could separate yourself and watch yourself teach, which you'll do when you record yourself later on this year, and you watch yourself teach, you see all kinds of things. And so what we're doing is we're just playing back to you. We're just feeding back to you what we're observing. Here's what you may not have picked up in what you did and what the students are doing. And from that, be able to dissect and make some decisions about what has to happen.
Excellent. Well,
I was just thinking about there's a lot of things that happen when I'm teaching that I'm being acted upon rather than acting. And if you were to ask me what was it you were doing right then, I'd be like, I don't know. It's not intentional, in other words. It's just kind of seems to happen. And I think when I receive feedback, it gives me the tools to act rather than get acted upon, because I can recognize it when that why question is asked. I'm like, oh, I don't know why, and then you can fix that. You can actually make it something intentional and purposeful.
is Peyton Manning, Tanner Manning, were they fairly decent quarterback?
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna find out.
What makes them really good quarterback?
Lots of practice.
Huh?
Lots of practice.
So they practice a lot.
They get feedback.
They throw perfect spirals, right? I've heard Brother Martin use this analogy many times. Footwork perfect, throws it 16 feet over the receiver's head. The critical part of having a good quarterback, you gotta have somebody on the other end who's willing to do what?
Receive.
Yes.
Receive it. The hardest part of feedback is your attitude, your willingness to receive it. And that's why it says receiving and implementing. Let me give you 2 examples out of my life. Before I had this assignment, Elder Richard G. Scott came to our stake. He said, "Do you have a few minutes? I'd like to visit with you." We went into a little room. He said, "As you know, we're having a youth session tomorrow morning. You work with youth all the time. What do you think I should teach the youth at your stake?" Now, what I shared is completely unimportant. What impresses you about this? A member of the quorum of the 12 apostles, a prophet, seer, and revelator, to a punk. What do you think we ought to do? So I had opportunities with feedback, and what's interesting, Brother Hunt, you're in stake presidency now, and the brethren will come. They will ask you, what could we say that would be most helpful in the adult session? Or what could we do to strengthen the youth? And they will ask for that. It's just astounding to me. The other one was even earlier in my life, when before I even joined S&I had a summer job that was kind of fun. Before summer, BYU Now, if you'll forgive just this personal explanation, because I think it will be helpful to you. I was working as a hiking guide in the Grand Canyon when one of the river guides broke his leg. And they called and said, "You're running your own boat next week." Now, if you want to be a river guide today, you have to do 9 weeks of summer training and make 6 trips before they even let you take your first boat. You understand what I am just going through? I have never driven my own boat through the Grand Canyon with 7 of the largest navigable rapids in the world. I was simply told, follow the guy in front of you. That's all I was told. Now, here's the reason I share it. For the first summer, I cleaned out the insurance coverage of our company. People were getting hurt all the time. Well, obviously, I didn't know what I was doing. People would say, "Well, what's this canyon?" I have no idea. How deep's the river? I don't know. And it was really embarrassing for a while. The company president, the start of my second year, said, "I'm going with you the first trip." And during that whole trip, he did not withhold one single piece of very clear, kind, candid feedback. Slow down. I mean, even all the passengers here. Slow down. Your boat's in the wrong angle. Get the people out of the flex section. The flex section is where the boat flexes in a rapid. When you go through house rock, get the people on the right side of the boat. Don't let anybody sit on the nose. And he was telling me all these do's and don'ts. Now here's the only reason I share that with you. From that trip on, 12 years, not a single accident. Am I grateful for the feedback? What if it hurt a little bit? So, as we plow ahead, I can promise you this. You would want to know that the guy driving that boat has had a little bit of experience and is open to feedback. Or someone who just is out for a really good time. Said another way, as a river guide, my response to feedback, lives are at stake. Well, guess what? What about your teaching opportunities? More than mine. If somebody dies or drowns on the river, there's nothing good resurrection won't solve, okay? But in your case, lives are at stake. And so there's a couple things I want to just really briefly teach you about feedback. You're an athlete.
I am
Did you play basketball?
volleyball.
Volleyball, okay. How high is the volleyball net in your gym?
Oh gosh, when we practice or when we play? We practice at men's high, we play at women's high.
Okay.
When we're, yeah.
So when you went to the next game in another gym, how tall was it?
How tall?
Did they move the net depending on how tall or short the team was?
It was right
How many of you play basketball? Okay, what do they call that thing I'm trying to shoot basket in?
The hoop.
They call it a hoop? It's called something else.
Standard.
It's called a what? called the standard. And some of you are going to be teaching at Lehigh. Who's teaching at Lehigh? Let's just go through here for just a second. Let's just go to Lehigh for a minute. How tall is the basket going to be in Lehigh?
10 feet.
Springville,
10 feet.
Maple Mountain. What if it's boys? Or in our case, brothers and sisters? Does it change? What's the baptismal requirements in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mongolia?
80 years old.
Can you imagine you live in a world where you see the chaos of a fluctuating standard? Okay? So here's my first promise to you as you receive feedback. Okay? The standard, and this might sound a little cruel, the standard are not those three men. Now you may ask them, what would you have done? And I suspect if, and I know them well enough, they're going to be hesitant. Because they're not going to say, well, I would have. They're going to do this right here. Okay? This is the standard. It's really, really simple. So here's what I want you to do. Open anywhere you want. You can go to any page, start reading. As soon as you see a standard, raise your hand. Statement of standard. Ready? Go.
Teachers should be aware that different learning activities encourage different moods and attitudes in students.
So that's probably something I ought to know long before they show up. But they may use that as an example of a standard. Go, Cole, you have one.
A wise teacher will also remember that patience and consistency are important in helping students understand.
So their feedback might be, let's look at page
36.
and let's read this. You were a little bit impatient with some of those students, so Cole, what's your feedback? Okay.
If you want to be a wise teacher, you should be more patient and consistent.
Great, who's got another piece? Josh?
Use the curriculum.
Okay. So you may hear us say, let's look at page,
56.
and let's talk about your use of the curriculum today, class. Brian, you have one.
President Ezra Kath Benson taught, always remember there is no satisfactory substitute for the scriptures and the words of the living prophets. These should be your original sources.
So if they were not my original sources, will you hear Brother Martin say, you know, I really think you probably should have used the scriptures more. You'll never hear him say that. I know him really well. He'll turn to that page and you'll read it together. So can I just give you this suggestion? Among everything else you have to do this summer, the better you know that handbook, the better teacher you're going to be. Guaranteed. There are, like in scriptures, some one-liners. I will go and do the things, right? Wickedness never was happiness. You ought to, as you go through your gospel teaching and learning handbook, like Sierra has already done so, I can see it. There are some one-liners you really ought to pay attention to. They're especially important if they're in a green box and they come from a prophet, seer, and revelator. There's 81 of them. Okay? So you're saying, I don't know if I got time. I'd read the green boxes then. And let those be your standards. So there's ground rule one. You do not have to teach like the guy next door. You do not have to teach like Brother Boyle or Brother Martin or the principal or the most famous teacher in the building. It's not the standard. That's the standard, your handbook, okay? Sometimes we draw a graph that looks like this. So here's the standard for teaching, and let's just take Matt. Is that okay?
Yeah.
There's Matt's teaching, right? That's not Matt's teaching. We paint it as if, wow, Matt, we better start at ground zero. Brother Martin just told you something. You're not here unless you are you're an outstanding teacher with potential to be hired. More likely, it looks like this. Now, where do you want the help? Where do you want the feedback? Sierra, you are about the best person. You're just remarkable at asking questions. Let's look at page 66, 7, and 8. Look at these, the way you're using these questions to bring about desired outcome. Is that going to help her? We'll probably point it out, to her, but where are we gonna spend our time? Are you up to it? You want the shot? Okay. I had a sister who battled 4 different kinds of cancer. And eventually it was down to a daily shot of chemo. And the only reason I mention that is she wanted to, she just wanted to live long enough to see her first grandchild. That's all she wanted to do. Painful, horrific chemos and shots. So her desire drove the pain. Okay? So, principle number 1, I just encourage you to write it down or at least memorize it this way. Feedback from these great men who are going to watch you teach will always be based on a standard. That makes it really, really simple because when they leave, you have the standard written in front of you and they're going to help you with little things that could help you do that. Okay? Second, Brother Martin, will you talk to us about stances? Come on up.
So Brother Robbins has seen me do this training before and asked me how to do it. So, baseball, you all know I love baseball, and I was talking to some earlier about how I ruined my body doing sport, but
The UVU students may not know your background though.
well, I just played baseball.
Really
Played baseball
well.
in college, and I love baseball a lot. And but when we were kids playing wiffle ball, anyone do this in here, by the way? One of the funnest things to do would be to emulate the stances of all the different professional baseball players. I could still do them. Anyone know who this is?
Cal Ripken.
It is. Yeah. Anyone know who this is? That's Julio Franco. Anyone know if he's the pitcher, open stance, crouched down like this? Anyone know who that is?
Babe Ruth.
No.
He's the only baseball player I know. So.
Ricky Henderson. And so I would go and we would play, and we would be playing wiffle ball, and literally, like, my little brother would stand like this, and I'd be like, okay, Ricky Henderson's up. and we do. Now here's the thing, which one of those is the right way to stand? Yeah, each one of those that I mentioned were Hall of Famers. Okay, so honestly, obviously it's not the stance, but there is something at the point of contact, no matter how you start. If you look at Julio Franco, Cal Ripken, or Ricky Henderson, they look the same. And there's something that's called the power V. And it's this, okay? That your arms are extended, your nose is on the ball, and your weight is pushing off, because you do as much hitting with your legs as you do with your arms. And so it's like you're doing a lunge into the baseball, and like that. So they could start, they could do whatever they want. They do these things. Some of them have the bat flat, have the bat up, have the bat on their shoulder. You know, if you have the parent, get your elbow up. That's just dumb. Don't yell that at your kids. There's nothing that proves that helps anything. And so, anyway, but the point is to get here. And if you could get there with your nose on the ball, arms extended, and I mean, there's a lot of technical things here, right? But in order to hit an outside pitch, then, in order to get there, you have to hit it further back. Do you see that? So an outside pitch, you're going to hit back here. Over the middle, you're going to hit here. If there's an inside pitch, have you heard the term turn on it? That means that you have to get here and hit the ball out in front of the plate if you're going to hit it. Because if you try to do this and hit the ball, how much power are you going to have? So regardless of where the ball is, that you want to get there when you hit it. That's what's important. So sometimes in baseball, you have parents yelling things like, get your elbow up, or whatever. The stance isn't important as long as you end up in the right place. Is that enough for what?
Okay, stay right here. Okay. So, show us those again, those stances.
Okay.
Okay, there's
Valerie.
Tony. This is Tony's teaching stance. Go ahead. There's Josh's, or Tyler's. Okay, next one. There's Michaela, or Joseph. Okay, so tell me, give me the V. Doesn't matter, because you have unique gifts, talents, abilities. I'm looking around, none of you were made the same, okay? You're all very unique. So what is this right here in your classroom? My purpose, regardless of my stance. You ready? Our purpose is to help youth and young adults understand and rely on the teachings and atonement of Jesus Christ. Pause. Where are those found? Where are the teachings and atonement of Christ found? So let's just say it that way. Ready? Our purpose is to help youth and young adults understand and rely on the Scriptures. And if you're doing that, okay? But we're not going to talk about your batting stance. Now, Brother Hunt's going to teach you about stances that may matter. Okay? Some stances don't. How you approach it, how you engage. If you're poking triples and home runs out of the park in your classroom, awesome. Go ahead.
This is just to say that there are so many different personalities in seminaries and institutes. And as you move around from faculty to faculty, you'll see those personalities. And the beauty of it is that they have different voices that are heard by different students. In fact, you'll have to be careful throughout your career because there may be times where someone has to be in your class. And you may feel kind of prideful about the fact that they want so badly to be in your class, not realizing that there are others who are begging to be in somebody else's class, not yours. Because that's the voice that resonates for them. So don't confuse what I'm about to say with being contradictory to what was just said about that or about personality. But there are certain soft skills. There are certain things that when they don't exist in the classroom, then they can work against you. And so sometimes it may be frustrating because you'll get feedback from us and it will feel kind of personal because, you know, ultimately what we're concerned with is the outcome, of course. But we might be seeing some things that are making it harder for you to reach the outcome that seem not very substantial. They seem like position. Do you know what I mean yet? So when I was student teaching, I loved my podium. And I would stand behind it like this, and my notes were here. And because I was very anxious, I can't remember who of you it was I was talking with about kind of drawing a blank sometime. Was it you? And feeling the need to kind of have your notes pretty handy. And because I felt that way, I didn't venture far from my podium. So someone would make a comment over here, I'd be like, yes. Thank you, that's wonderful, thank you. And it went with me everywhere I taught.
Kind of like a walker?
Yeah, like a walker. And I didn't have a videotape to record myself teaching and realize how ridiculous that looks. But it went with me. My pre-service trainer came and watched me, and afterwards he said, you gotta get out from behind the Rami anthem. And he just told me how ridiculous that seemed. And for me to grab my scriptures, bring them with me, and to come out and to start teaching. Does that feel very substantial to you, coming out from behind a podium? But can you see how it can be distracting and keeping somebody from learning? In the end, you probably could have a positive experience with me standing behind this podium. But why don't we just try to improve on these little teeny things that could remove the distractions? A couple of years ago, we had a young man who, when he was doing his practicum, he was a pretty small-framed guy. and he would stand up and he would put his hands way down in his pockets. And as the students would be talking, he would pace. Now, if he were here, I would do this. I'm not making fun of him, okay? But he would put his hands down in his pockets and he would walk like this. And he was listening to the students, and he'd be like, yes. And it was sort of this George McFly thing. You know, like, I just don't have, I can't take that. And so after the lesson was done, I said, okay, so here's the deal. You're a smaller framed guy. You've got to make yourself a classroom presence. This kind of feels like I'm talking about, right? You're good. I like that. You're just like, But I said, you're a smaller framed guy, you've got to make yourself a classroom presence. Stand up. Now, I'm not obsessed with whether people have it. I've taught you this week with my hands in my pockets. There are other people who will have a bigger problem with that than me. But I said, in your case, you got to get your hands out of your pockets, and you need to move around the room a little bit, and you need to project so that you can be heard just outside this classroom door. We talked about things that felt a lot like stance. But can you see how they can remove distractions? He completely accepted that feedback. It was night and day difference. He was a classroom presence. He made himself more of a presence so that he could be heard. He wasn't just white noise. So I know that sounds like that could be conflicting to what you were just taught. It's not meant to be. It's meant to say, we want to try to remove all possible distractions, and so you will get feedback along those lines. But you'll also see teachers who are so different in personalities. They're not everybody is, back thumping, noogie giving manly man. And yet you'll see they'll succeed. They'll get that power V. And so we'll try to be careful in that regard, to be able to give you feedback to remove some of those distractions while making sure that we realize the real substance is making that contact and getting those outcomes.
All I was just going to say is all of those were Hall of Famers. If Julio Franco was batting 100 that way, his batting coach would probably say, "What are you doing? Like, stop that." And not that that's how I'm talking as a baseball coach, not as a pre-service trainer. But do you get what I'm saying? Like, if you're getting there and having success, and anyway, that's maybe another little caveat there is sometimes we'll talk about those things, especially if it's getting in the way of you hitting the ball.
So would you welcome that feedback? Brother Robbins, you teach really predominantly to the left side of your class. You're going, that's not standard based, but it's a distraction. Would you want to know that? Is Brother Hunter, are you the young man, was he grateful for your feedback? Notice, I want you to read this if you would. Joe, take it, my brother.
Early in my 10 years at 70, I was companion to Elder Russell M. Nelson in the state conference. We had a wonderful experience together, and as we finished and were driving home, I said to him, "Elder Nelson, I hope that if you ever see an error in me or in some shortcoming, you will tell me about it." He quickly replied, "I will."
So don't do that. Go.
I was a little unnerved by this seeming anxiousness to comply with my request.
Oh, I will.
But then he said, "That is one of the ways we show our love for one another. I believe that is a true principle."
So if these brethren make a comment, what was our first principle today? Feedback is always based on a standard. Okay? Is that a standard to help a teacher avoid anything that would distract from the spirit or the students? So we're still on the standard thing, but some of it will be number two, some of it will just be related to your teaching stance. Brother Robbins, you always call on the best I'm just giving you feedback I got when you always teach the left side of your class. You always call on just the best readers. You don't give anybody else a chance to read. You always call on the best kids to write on the board. Okay? So my question is, why would we give you that feedback? Look at that slide and tell me why we would even dare tread lightly into that sacred personal stance and say something to you. What's the motive? We love you. We want you to have that powerful experience with your students every day, Sean.
No, I'm good, thanks.
No, go ahead.
It was an additional example about, I've sat in the back of a classroom and I've heard a teacher, this has happened multiple times, but I've heard teachers where they have kind of a nervous habit of repeating a word. They'll say it a lot. And then I've noticed one student lean over to the other one, kind of smile and say, you can see that their lips, their voice, they're mouthing that word like they caught it, they're distracted by it. You'd want to know that, right? You'd want to know. You might not be catching it from the front of the classroom. So when I saw that happen, I just took out my iPad and I just kind of started, I thought, I'll just time for a couple of minutes how many times he says the word. And I just made a note of it, and when class was done, I said, in about a 2-minute period of time, you said that word this many times. Could you see that person going home to their wife or their husband and saying, that seems pretty nitpicky, to count the number of times I said that word? But if I saw a student lean over and mouth that word, you'd want to know. It's a distraction, and so it's coming not out of a desire to be nitpicky, but because you're loved, to say, hey, there's something that you ought to be aware of.
Okay, guys, you ready? Okay, guys, now let's next. Okay, guys, can you see the pattern? And you won't catch it. I want you to. Okay, now I want you to. Next, here's what I want you to do. Awesome, wonderful comments. Okay, now I want to. What's the problem here? You're not catching it. Yeah. What's way better than I want you to? I want you to. I want you to. Let's look at this together. Let's look at these verses, and you read for us, Michaela, and see, let's, us, and we'll help you with those. Are you okay with that? We will do it because we love you. Okay? Now, the third one, and I'm going to do you and you. There were comments. You did you happen to see Brother? Did you happen to see your two teachers in the back of your class? Right?
Yeah.
Yes, they look good.
Is my head that big? That's all you can
It's a
see.
little bigger than that.
Go stand up there.
Always based on a standard. All feedback will be given in an attempt to help you improve and excel. Number 3, sorry to break the news to you, we're not watching you. We really are. You're watching us, but we're not watching you. What are we observing? Why would we do that? My brother Sergio.
Their experiences with what matters most.
What kind of an experience are they having? For example, I would ask it, oh, I missed your comment. Don't. You had your hand and I smacked it and said,
Did do that.
what'd you say? What do you want to say?
What are they gonna say?
Yeah.
You're not gonna say it, or is this, okay.
I just thank you, and
I was just gonna say how lucky you are, because my older brother just finished his first year in investment banking, and his first year in San Francisco, they try to weed you out your first year. They kind of like drill you into the ground to see, like, if you want to do this, like, we're really gonna push you to your limits. And like how lucky we are that for our first year or semester or whatever doing this, you want to help us. Your motivation isn't let's weed them out. Your motivation is let's get them all hired and let's try to polish them so they can reach their potential. And I think that we're super lucky to have that. But I think that falls onto us of having that mindset, of having that attitude that you're not being nitpicky, you want us to succeed, and how this is one of the, if not the only, venue in the world that has that mindset of wanting us to succeed rather than weed us out, which is
perfectly said. I have a son-in-law who's in that weeding process. 16 hours a day, Saturdays and Sundays, 2 o'clock in the morning, called into work. They're just weeding him. So tell me why these two guys are there. What are they doing in the back of your room? Well, it's really simple. I'll just ask, what are you doing in the front of your room? My purpose is to youth, young adults, understand and scriptures. So what are they doing in my class? Our purpose, we could say it as pre-service trainers, is this, my purpose is to help youth and young adults understand and rely on them. That's all it is. Okay? And so that third piece of feedback, you don't even need to, you can just ignore us. In fact, I'll be more candid. The minute you start teaching us, you will become less effective. The minute you pay any attention to us, you will be less effective. The minute we become even a hint in the back of your mind, you should pray for blindness. Okay? We try and be invisible, but that's pretty hard to do when you're handsome like these guys. Okay? To me, it's like, hey, that guy looks like the custodian. So, but I'm just suggesting to you, they're going to walk in your class, and I know the immediate response. Okay? Your blood pressure is going to go up. You're going to be nervous. Where am I in the outline? Forget it. We're not there to watch you. If that'll take any pressure away, let it do so. We are there to see if your students are having powerful, say it again, Brother Hunt,
Experience with the Spirit in the Scriptures every day.
students. If you're in 471, you know the 6 S's. We are there to see students, help me, studying Scripture sequentially with the Spirit to learn about the Savior. There it is. But I was teaching them about the Savior with the Spirit, sequentially using the Scriptures to help my students. Okay? There's have to be an order. Just get those 6 S's and you'll be fine. Number 3, we are there, okay, to help you help students. Now, let me tell you why that means something to us. These 2 good men have children entering seminary. You have a son,
I have a daughter now.
in seminary. I have grandchildren in 2 years who will be in seminary. And gosh dang it, if I'm sitting in the back of your class and they're not having a powerful spiritual experience, I'm going to want to help you. Back to the same thing. Lives are at stake. That's why we're there. Our only purpose is to help you help them understand and rely on the teachings that are told. Here's the way Elder Maxwell said it. Nobody can say it the way Elder Maxwell does. Here we go. Go ahead, my brother.
John.
Yeah, John.
It is left to each of us to balance contentment regarding what God has allotted to us in life with some divine discontent resulting from what we are in comparison to what we have the power to become.
Because of that, I want to improve. Have you ever considered the atonement is for self-improvement? Anthony, take it, bud.
We should regularly apply the atonement for self-improvement. We should use the course of steady improvement, which is really the path of discipleship. We will become more righteous and can move from mere acknowledgement of Jesus onto admiration of Jesus, and then on to adoration of Jesus, and finally to emulation of Jesus.
As a teacher, could you teach like him? Okay, the last thing we will do, and you make sure we do it in 7 minutes, is read Elder Packer. Okay, we cannot end if that's your job. Go.
In that process of striving to become more like Him through steady improvement, we must be in the posture of repentance, even if no major transgression is involved.
See, we're not talking about right and wrong here, sin and evil, good and bad. We're just talking about little things that could happen in your teaching that would make you a little more Christ-like. Would you want us to share that with you? So number 1, give me the 3 principles I've tried to teach you. Number 1, feedback will always be based on understanding. Number 2, all feedback will be given from a basis of and so it'll usually be 3 words: kind, clear, and candid. You okay with that? Number 3.
They're not watching us.
We're not there to watch you. We're there to watch your students and see what kinds of experiences there. All in an effort to just keep improving and improving and improving. Now, there's 2 sets, we'll do this really quick. There's 2 sets of feedback that you can be given. Go to page 78, I'll do this really quickly. Henry, would you just start reading on the top of page 78? If it's chapter 6, if you have Searstone. Chapter 6, here we go, big A.
As teachers strive to implement the principles and methods described in this handbook, they should constantly but patiently work to improve. Teachers must learn principles of effective teaching and master effective teaching skills line upon line through study, faith, practice, and experience.
See, you have been studying chemistry or English or physics or recreational management. You have not taken a seminary teaching class except for Religion 471. How many classes are required for a degree? You have 2. You have 471, and then you have this lab or practicum. You see that? And that's your career. Much like me on the river, just follow the guys. Okay? There isn't a lot here. And that's why we're kind of urgent as we work hard. Keep going, here we go.
There are many ways to evaluate teaching effectiveness and to receive feedback and assistance as to how to improve. Some things that will help teachers improve are formal.
There's one, okay? So Brother Martin, Brother Hunt, Brother Boyle sitting in the back of your class, that's formal. A principal, a student evaluation, student comments. Brother Smith, you're really helping me love the Book of Mormon. Thanks, there's some feedback, okay? The other kind, there are also informal ways. I want to spend just a minute on that. Brother Virgin mentioned a couple. Remember the questions he showed you, the bullet points? Let me show you something fun. Go to page 12. If you haven't, I would encourage you to write right along the top of page 12, today in class. Okay? Now, can I be blunt again? If the only response to feedback are those 3 men, okay, you probably will not be hired. As good as those 3 men are, and there are none better. Who's even better than Brother Hunt, Brother Martin, and Brother Boyle?
Spirit.
How about the 3rd member of the Godhead? Is he okay? So, and Elder Eyring mentioned it. You could have read on in chapter 6. Elder Eyring says you need to pause at the end of a class and start firing yourself some questions. Well, could I just suggest this is a great list? Today in class, did we have a meaningful devotional? No, we didn't. Fix it. Second bullet, Brian. Today in class.
Reading and teaching from the scriptures and the words of the prophet.
Yeah, I did that one. Great. 3rd one, Matt. Today in class.
Focused on examples and discussions on the Savior and bearing testimony of him.
Get your card, okay? You may even want to glue that to your speedometer. I don't know where you want to put it. Okay? But when you're driving back to school, just have that little exercise. And there's formal feedback from some incredibly gifted, talented teachers. Just add up how many years they've taught as principals, coordinators, directors. Multiply that by how many classes they've looked at, okay? I can assure you, you could not have finer mentors than these 3 men. We couldn't. I would listen very carefully to every little piece of feedback they give you and seek and pray and plead with heaven to implement it. Okay? That's the formal. I would also encourage you to use the informal by just simply asking those questions. And where were those bullets that Brother Virgin mentioned? Remember those? it's on page 49. Is my teaching, remember those 4 questions? So there's another one to add to it. Brother Hunt, you had a comment, please.
Just that, you know, we sometimes struggle a little bit, and go back and forth a little bit about whether it's wise for us to watch you as frequently as we do. We want to be helpful, so we try to come in there every couple of weeks. Some of us, you know, you go a little bit further back in the pre-service program, and some of the earlier generations weren't being observed nearly as much, and it left them to have to innovate and troubleshoot and problem solve and seek help from faculty and others, and go to that spirit for instruction. And sometimes we wonder if maybe we should leave you to that a little bit more. You know, we've kind of settled that we'll err on the side of trying to be helpful, and we've interpreted that as being there a lot. But there really is wisdom in recognizing that even if we're there every 2 or 3 weeks, you're there every day, and the ones who succeed in their classrooms are the ones who are assessing themselves a lot.
Awesome.
Not second guessing themselves, assessing.
That's where I was going. You have a really tough class, you have a really good class. Which one do you hope they come to? Okay, see, that's totally different from banking. I want him to see me really defend this. I've got these 3 kids, and they're killing me. Well, don't wait 3 weeks. Wait about 3 minutes and call one of those men. I am totally stuck on Isaiah. You're one of the few, but Brother Boyle, help me with 2 Nephi 11. Is that okay? Yes. Our purpose is to help you. Okay. Key word, the operative word being help. Okay. So I invite you to do that very thing. I just plead with you. Much like a river guide or a general authority, or remember the quorum of the 12. You should wake up every morning and say, I'm ready to grow. Not go. I'm ready to grow. You will all be parents. You will all be grandparents. Many of you will be bishops, Relief Society presidents. Some of you will be general authorities. Regardless of this career, you ought to have in your mind an attitude of growth. Any of you watch Steph Curry play basketball? How's he at handling a basketball? Okay. Why is he so good? Natural born skill, right? In fact, you were the one that showed us that. Go again. Tell him what he does every day, every practice, every pregame.
Well, I mean, some of you have probably seen this. There's YouTube videos about it, but he has a dribbling skills drill that he goes through before every single game, the same exact one, and it's pretty extensive. I mean, it's not 5 dribbles. It's a 15-minute exercise of handling the ball before every game. So
You ought to look at something every day. Hey, how can I grow today? And push yourself. Formal or informal, however you do that. Whether Brother Hunt comes, I am not really, my questions aren't as, will you come? You can call them and invite them to come to your class, okay? Once again, we'll land on page 78, 79. As a river guide, lives are at stake. Laying sewer pipe is probably not. Okay. Teaching seminary. If there is a more sacred trust given to anybody on planet Earth, I'd like to know what it is. We've talked to those of you who are at BYU. There's no practicum teacher waiting in the office to come in. Okay? It's your class, your students, your attendance, tardies, grades, parent conferences, phone call. They're your kids. You are the only person in time or eternity that will teach them the Book of Mormon in seminary. Does that help you understand some perspective? 30 years from now, they will say, Brother Starr taught me the first half of the Book of Mormon. What do you remember? My favorite lesson was Jacob. No, they're not going to tell you what lesson they learned. Okay? I have students come up to me, and it's either one of two things. Yeah, that's unfair. I shouldn't have done that. One, forgive me. You know my heart. I'm just trying to tell you. I've seen students come up and they say one of two things. You never gave up on me. They remember that. I've heard that dozens of times. And secondly, you really love the Scriptures. And if they knew that I loved the Scriptures and I would never give up on them, now that's okay. I hope they'd remember that. But there's a way higher standard. Here we go. Go. Page 78, there's only one person on planet Earth that would dare say this, and it's President Packer, okay? Start page 78, ultimately, last paragraph on that page.
Ultimately, the goal of every religious educator should be to represent as well as possible the Savior of the world as a teacher come from God.
Go ahead.
Speaking to a group of seminary and institute faculty, Elder Boyd K. Packer said, "The attributes which it has been my choice privilege to recognize in you, brethren and sisters, over the years are no more nor less than the image of the Master Teacher showing through. I believe that to the degree you perform, according to the challenge and charge which you have, the image of Christ does become engraved upon your countenances.
Here it comes.
And for all practical purpose, in that classroom at that time and in that expression and with that inspiration, you are He and He is you."
How does that taste to you? That's the privilege of what you get to do. In the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord called priesthood holders, organized in 1834 to go on science camp, as saviors of men, lowercase. Okay? Your lowercase saviors. To save somebody, give it the best you got. We won't expect, obviously we won't expect that. No, none of us are there. But that's our objective, that's our goal. Wake up every day and say, I want to do it the way the Savior would do it. All of our feedback, all of our training, all of the efforts that these men will make, and Brother Virgin, is that impressive or what? Okay. Brother Webb, okay, in a couple of weeks you'll hear him, Brother Clark. The only purpose is to help you be better and to teach better. And I pray that we will do that in the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for the opportunity we've had this week to learn from me and from these wonderful brethren. Please help us to remember the things that the Spirit has prompted us with. Please help us to help one another this summer and learn to love those that we will teach. Please bless them with a desire to learn from the Book of Mormon and to come closer to Thee. Heavenly Father, we're thankful for this opportunity to touch the lives of students and to come to know Thee better. We ask for a blessing on us as we study to receive inspiration and guidance as we learn about the Book of Mormon and the doctrine and principles we can find in there. Please help us to do our best to become better every day. We love Thee, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. If any of you are available for about 5 minutes, I think that's all it would take for you to help us put this classroom back together again. If you need to run, that's okay, but if not, after you pack up your backpacks, we can kind of tell you where to put chairs and tables and get it done.
If you have your name tag on, if you could leave it with me, I'd appreciate it.
Give me cookies.